Okay, in this section we're going to start making a building mass, a building volume of a couple of building alternatives. To do this, I'm going to maximize the level 1 view, so just click maximize on the view that's called level 1. I'm going to use the CX command for zoom extents, and then also I'm going to use the close hidden windows shortcut up here on top of my program to close all the views that's now laying behind the floor level 1 plan. Like so. This is the same command here in the view menu to the right, close hidden windows. So there's basically two ways of making a building mass inside Revit. First thing, you go to the menu called Massing and Site. You'll see that you can create an in-place mass, or you can place an already modeled mass inside Revit. I'll get back to the details. Let's try first making an in-place mass. When I click in-place mass, Revit's going to give me a warning that I can close and ask me for a name. Let's just go with mass 1. Now, everything turns gray inside our modeling area. The entire menu inside Revit changes into something that asks you to model rectangles, lines, reference planes, and so on. And you have a finish mass and cancel mass button. Basically, this is a mode that you will have to exit in either using the cancel or finish mass commands. So this is you'll see this again in many times in Revit when you're modeling floors, for instance. Everything turns gray and your menu changes. So basically, we're going to start now by creating the simplest building form that you can ever do. We're going to create a perfectly rectangular building shape using the rectangle command here. When I click the rectangle command, Revit's going to ask me to model 4 lines using 2 clicks, basically like this. You can choose to model a model line or a reference line or a reference plane. I won't really touch on the differences, but simply explained, a model line will be consumed of the mass that it creates. A reference line will be preserved. So using the rectangle command, I'm going to snap to the intersection of the top and left reference plane that we modeled. This is going to be the extent of our building. This is going to be the outside, the skin, our facade. So I click one time here, and then I zoom out and zoom in on the bottom and right reference plane. Click. And then I'm going to click Modify or Escape on my keyboard. I'm going to select the 4 lines. They're stitched together, so if you click on one of them, they'll all be selected. And now I think it's time to open a 3D view to see this shape better. So you can use the 3D view, default 3D view command up here in the quick access toolbar. Just click default 3D view. You'll enter a 3D view. Actually, a new view is created in your project browser. You can see it here on the 3D views. 3D. It's bold now, so it's active. Inside a 3D view, you zoom and you pan like any normal view, but in addition to that, you can hold Shift on the keyboard and then spin your 3D view like so. You can do that with the view cube by just holding your left mouse key. The view cube, in addition to just giving you the ability to orbit your 3D view, can also orient it to different sides, like the south facade or the front facade or right or top or home, like so. Getting to know these like different ways of moving around in the 3D view is pretty important. So let's select these 4 lines again. You can just click on one of them and use Create Form. Couldn't be simpler. So now we have a form. I'm going to change the visibility states of this view. I'm going to change it from hidden line to shaded so that we can see a colorized surface of this apparently transparent form. Now, this building form just got a default height. We're going to change this height by clicking on the top surface and using the gizmo to move the building or the form up to our top level. You'll notice that when you try to select things in a 3D view inside Revit, Revit will not select the surface unless you click toggle on select elements by face on the bottom right corner. I always do that in a 3D view because I think it's easier to select elements, faces and elements and whatever in a 3D view when you can select the face and not just the edge of an element. So now we can click just anywhere on the top face and we can drag the gizmo, the blue arrow, which will vertically offset the top surface. You can also try changing the red arrow or the green arrow and see that it's pretty easy to make a irregular form. Let's undo that operation 2 times. So click on the top surface and I'm going to open a south elevation. With that selection still active, you'll get access to the levels, which is pretty important actually if you're going to work with something real here. So I'm going to drag the top surface up to the roof level. And then going back to the 3D view, I'm just going to finish this mass and we're done. Now the next thing that I always do when I've created a building mass like this working conceptually, I apply mass floors. So this is now an in-place mass element that you can start creating floors in. Select the mass and choose mass floors. Select level 1. I browse down to level 40 and generate floors for each level. Now what have I done now? As you can see, you have the 5 meter stories here and the 3.2 meters and the 3.8 meter stories. I have created an area for each level. So each level now cuts a horizontal cross section through this form. Now if I drag the form down, the floors or levels that are not longer cutting the form will disappear. And you can actually see now in the parameters here, in the parameters of this mass now, it says in my model here that I have a gross floor area of 30,930 square meters. Now if I drag it back, you will see that this number changes. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a pretty powerful tool when you're working with a building mass like this. So if I undo, I Control Z or click here undo back to the original height, you'll see that with the levels that we created earlier, I have approximately 36,000 square meters total on this building. That's pretty important data to have access to when you're working like this. So that's it on masses. You can also create masses using the family editor inside Revit. I'll touch on that in a moment. So let's move to design options. So say that you have several building forms like this, and you want to start looking at differences between them. So we have this parameter, right? I click on the mass, 36,400 square meters. I want to analyze a different form. So then you can start using design options in Revit, which is a pretty powerful tool for evaluating different options. They're located on the bottom of the program here, design options. You click on this small button and a dialog box opens. Now this is the way you work with design options in Revit. First you create an option set and then you start creating options. Option set 1, you can rename this to something, mass, whatever, and then option 1 can be mass 1. And then you can rename option 2 to whatever, mass 2. Now we're going to click on the mass and then use the button next to the previous button, add to set. We're going to add this option to option 1 and option 2, that is mass 1 and mass 2. Option 3 we're going to keep open for now. So when I click OK now, this element is not longer selectable. I can't click on it unless you deselect the toggle button, exclude options, then I get access to it. Basically, this is meant to work like this. You change from the main model design option, or which is like everything else, and then you select mass 1. Now mass 1 is selectable. Everything that's in the option mass 1 is going to be editable for you. You can change it, drag it, do whatever with it. Now, if I go back to mass 2, which is the second option, I have a copy of the same mass. Now we can start editing this mass. Sorry, I'll repeat that. You click on the mass and you go edit in place. And now let's try playing around with this guy for a bit. Let's add some model lines here on top. I add a diagonal and then 2 lines like so. You'll get like a triangle lying on top here. Now, instead of creating a form, I can create a void form and then drag this guy down. Now, this actually cuts our form. You can do a whole different number of operations on this. You can find points and then just drag points and change your design like this. Let's try some crazy stuff. Oh no, that's not very good. This guy then, like so? No. Okay, let's just keep this guy horizontal. Now, if I finish this mass, you'll see that all the mass floors are now cut by the same void. So you have updated the area. So if I click on this guy, you'll see that now it's 33,925 square meters, whereas if I go back to option 1, I have 36,400 square meters. So now it gets pretty interesting when you can start analyzing different design options and compare both their form, aesthetic abilities, and square meter wise. So the last thing that we'll try in this chapter is we'll add a third option, option number 3. So when I go to option number 3, all the other options disappear. When I go back to main model, the primary option will be shown. So if I go now to the design option menu again and I click on mass 2 and say make this the primary option, mass 2, then that's the mass that's going to be shown in main model. So let's go back to option 3, and I'm going to use the last way of making a mass, which is making a family. You go R, new conceptual mass. I've already done this. I've cheated, so let's go back to massing inside. I'll go place mass. No mass is loaded. Yes, sir, I would like to load. I go to my my references section and just load a mass called form. This is already modeled, already constructed, and I'll place this in the intersection between the vertical middle grid, that's grid number 9, and the horizontal reference plane that's in the middle of my building. So this will be symmetrical. Click, and then cancel modify. I go back to my 3D view and watch the shape. This is actually the form that we landed on this particular project. I actually did this in Revit and Rhino and Grasshopper, so that can be a later exercise or something. Now click on this mass 2 and use the mass floors command. We're going to select level 1 and also the roof perhaps, or just forget about it. The roof will not be included in this mass, so level 40. Okay, and now we can see the gross floor area. This guy actually has a bigger combined floor area than the previous 2 masses, and that's because of the base and the top, I think. 40.2 meters. And if there's one thing that I know about building owners, they love their square meters. So this is a pretty good example, a pretty good option, actually. So last, let's go back to main model. I go to my design options tab and then say that my option number 3 is going to be the primary option. When I do that, this guy will be shown in the main model. Okay, that's it for this section. Thank you.